There was one time I took what they term now as a weak shot. There was a doe in heat, ran by me. I was right on the edge of a standing cornfield with red oaks down the edge, and a doe ran by me and ran into the corn, and this 23-inch wide 10-point came running up and he was 6 yards, and he stopped underneath the oaks. He did not want to go into the corn because the corn rows were going the opposite direction. And for some odd reason, he stopped. And I did not have time to move around the tree. It all happened in just a millisecond. And I'm 30 feet up in this tree. So him being at 6 yards, I wasn't that worried about him picking me because I was basically over his head. And I lifted my bow up over my lead and swung around and took that shot. And that's a very, very difficult shot. It worked for me because I practiced that shot. It's not a shot I like taking. And of the 44 bucks I've got in the record book that I've taken out of a saddle, I've got 50 total, but 44 were out of a saddle. That's the only one that's ever been a weak shot.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 287. John Eberhart, Saddle Hunting Novice to Expert. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Minus 33 Merino Wool Layering System. Timeless natural insulation, keeping you warm on the coldest days while staying breathable and wicking away moisture on the wet ones. Rackology, everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslin Farm and Home storefronts or online at www.rackology.org. Grizzly Ears, the most advanced engineered wireless earbuds for the outdoors. Covert scouting cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security, and Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirch, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting BigBuckRegistryMerch.com. That's Big Buck Registry, MERCH.com. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Adam Hayes from Team 200 and themoonguide.com, and you're about to push play on one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry.
This is Art Helen from Art Helen Outdoors, Dodgeville, Wisconsin. Get ready to listen to another amazing interview, the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, this is Barry Wenzel from Brothers of the Bow and Trophy Whitetail Boot Camps. I'm not really sure what a podcast is, but you're about to push play on what is now my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. John Eberhart last joined us on episode 209, where we broke down John's tactics and answered questions based off of listener curiosities. This time is a little different. Now with a few saddle hunts under my belt and a first-hand account of what it's like, I hit John with numerous questions from the novice to the legendary saddle hunting expert. We engage in many details of saddle hunting overlooked in the first interview. We'll get to our entire interview with John Eberhart in just one moment. But before we do, let's hear from our friends at Minus 33 Merino Wool Products and Jim Keller with the Deer News. let's talk about a hunter's layering system for a sec. We need to be ready for any weather that Mother Nature throws at us. With the layering concepts that Minus 33 has created with their incredible merino wool products, they've got you covered. The Minus 33's merino wool expedition weight garments will keep you warm on the coldest late season days while regulating and wicking away moisture in a way that only merino wool can do. You see, wool will absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture without leaving you feeling wet or clammy, and wool insulates better than cotton or polyester and protects against hypothermia on those late season hunts. And here's another interesting point. You might not think of wool for early season, but with the Minus 33 wicking technology, I'll take a lightweight Minus 33 base layer any day in warm weather. Merino wool fibers naturally reject any bacteria found in moisture or sweat and gives you double protection against odor as your target buck approaches. Visit www.minus33.com to learn more about Minus 33's layering technology. Use the code BIGBUCK33 to get 10% off your next order.
Now here's Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Our first story this week. Putnam County man faces hunting-related charges for killing deer worth around $4,500 without the proper license. This story is from the WTHI TV 10 website and was posted by Chris Essex. A Putnam County man is facing charges after officials used his cell phone records to bust him for multiple hunting violations. The investigation started last November after a complaint of someone hunting from an off-road vehicle and trespassing. Around the same time, 37-year-old David McCullough from Green Cattle claimed he killed a trophy-class deer. Conservation officers checked their records and found inconsistent reporting of the killed deer. They say an interview showed even more discrepancies. That is when officials used a search warrant to check McCullough's phone. They say data from the search shows a text from McCullough that same day that claims he was planning to hunt without a valid hunting license. McCullough allegedly sent messages describing the deer he killed with time and date stamps from about 45 minutes before he bought the correct license online. The deer McCullough killed has an estimated value of $4,500 due to its size. McCullough is facing multiple hunting-related charges. Hunter bags rare antlered doe, deer of a lifetime. This story is from the Fox News website and was reported by Janine Puhak. One Oklahoma hunter was recently in for quite a surprise when he realized the antlered deer he shot was not a male but rather a female doe. Outdoorsman Chris Blades was on the prowl in Seminole County when he harvested what he initially suspected to be an extremely non-typical buck that was in fact biologically female. Officials for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation have since described the doe as the deer of a lifetime. Biologists say this can occur in an average of 1 in 10,000 does. Reps for the OWC wrote on Facebook. For this reason, regulations for deer are referred to as antlered and antlerless, not buck and doe, the department said, sharing 3 images of Blades' catch in a post that has since been liked more than 2,200 times. When contacted for comment, ODWC big game biologist Dallas Barber confirmed to Fox News that Blades' catch was a white-tailed deer and described the antlered female as, quote, very rare. While it is very rare, we do see 1 or 2 antlered deer harvested each year. It is caused by hormonal imbalance, Barber said. As long as deer season is open and you are abiding by our management zone's designated doe days, it is never illegal to harvest a doe, he said. This might be the new world record whitetail. This story is from the Meat Eater website and was reported by Spencer Newharth. Social media is abuzz this morning as deer hunters fawn over what might be the new world record whitetail. Gunnar Womack, a teen out of Oklahoma, arrowed this incredible 8x8 buck last night while hunting over a wheat field. An initial score by Womack's dad put the buck at 201 inches net and 214 inches gross. Womack said the 13-inch difference comes from the shorter left G2 and broken main bean on the right side. The current world record typical whitetail is the famous Hansen buck, which has just over 213 inches of net antler. Womack has a better shot at claiming the new world record for a typical whitetail taken with archery equipment. That record belongs to Mel Johnson and has stood since 1965. Mel's perfect 6x6 Illinois deer scored 204 inches. Even if he can't reach the Hansen or Johnson buck, Womack will likely beat the current Oklahoma typical record of 194 inches. Womack's buck will certainly be close, but he'll have to wait another 59 days to get an official Boone and Crockett measurement. The club requires a drying period before taking a final score, which sometimes leads to as much as 5 inches in score lost. New research sheds light on lunar phase impact on white-tailed deer. This story is from the Spokesman Review website and was reported by John Hayes. Conventional wisdom has long held that deer are more active on moonlit nights and most active under a full moon. The day after, the conjecture followed deer move around less in the daylight. Research from 2017 says maybe not. That's because 2 years ago, the Penn State College of Agricultural Sciences published research suggesting that the moon and its phases have little to no impact on deer mobility by day or night. The research used GPS-monitored positions of does 2 years old or greater collected in October 2015 and October 2016. The original research had tracked those does on an hourly basis, providing better positioning data. The statistical model combined the elements of sunrise, sunset, hour of day, and moon phase, defined as a full moon being greater than 67% illuminated, a partial moon being 33% to 67% illuminated, and a new moon less than 33% illuminated. Tens of thousands of data points were tracked by Jessica Hepner, a Penn State undergrad awarded a summer research grant to analyze deer forest study data. The GPS telemetry showed that the deer moved nearly 200 feet per hour at night and fewer than 165 feet per hour during daylight hours. They moved from about 400 to 450 feet per hour at sunset and sunrise, and were more active near dusk than dawn. Overlaid against the periods of full moon, the study showed that the deer traveled fewer than 20 feet further per hour during nights with a new moon. In daylight, during periods of partial moon phase, they moved about 13 feet farther. Dwayne Diefenbach, adjunct professor of wildlife ecology and leader of the Pennsylvania Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit at Penn State, says that while the study was based on more data and used better technology than previous moon phase studies, more work could be done. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. Special thanks to Tim Donzie, Daniel Applebaum, and John Geis for leads on stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Well, thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is John Eberhart. John Eberhart, welcome back to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Jay, and yourself?
Doing quite well. Thank you for asking. I got to say, I finally got to go out in the woods and hunt with a saddle for the first time ever the other day. And I knew you were coming on the show, so it's like, you know what, this is going to be a perfect time to start asking John a lot of questions. Because last time we did it, I'm just speculating and going off what other people had asked me to ask, but I didn't have any reference point of my own, but now I do.
Well, I'm a catch-all, and I think I can pretty much answer any question anybody has on saddle hunting, because I don't think anybody in the world has hunted out of the saddle more than me, or shot as many deer out of the saddle.
Right. So I want to break it all down into little parts, as I think people who are curious about saddle hunting will want to know. And then there may be some advanced stuff that people have been, and you'll have to guide me there, I think. The people that have been hunting in the saddle for a while, what things might they be overlooking? We'll get into that in a sec. You had mentioned in the pre-show that the hunting public had just finished their gathering up there in Michigan. What was that all about?
It was very interesting because initially it was supposed to be in Zone 3, which is southern Michigan, which is where probably 3/4 of the Michigan population lives, and the public land down in Zone 3 gets pressured way more than it does in northern Michigan. But they switched it. They moved it up to northern Michigan, kind of because I let the cat out of the bag. I thought Aaron had told me I could, say it was going to be in southern Michigan. And so I said something on another podcast, and they actually emailed me, and they said, we have had thousands, not hundreds, thousands of hunters that follow us that live in southern Michigan want to know where it's at. So they moved it up to northern Michigan, where there's a lot less hunting pressure. But it just ended. I think a couple of the guys are hunting tonight on their way home, but they're all packed up and left. I think Dan is hunting tonight.
Okay.
There was one buck shot. I think Joe is Dan's compadre.
Oh, Mario, maybe?
Huh?
Was it Mario?
I'm pretty sure it's Joe.
Joe, okay.
Yeah, he shot a little 8-point yesterday, but that was the only, I guess I could say, legal buck shot. And
okay.
There was 2 does shot.
Gotcha.
There was, let's see, Tethered had Greg and Ernie, and 3 of their pro staffers, Dan and Joe, were here from the Beast. There was 5 guys here from the hunting public, and I think 3 or 4 of them might have hunted. And unfortunately, Jeff Sturgis was scheduled to be here, and he came up Monday night, and then his dad died Tuesday morning.
Oh, gotcha.
And he was he knew he was going to die, but obviously it was a surprise it was that day. So he obviously left. But we had a great time. I was up. I didn't hunt other than opening evening, and I passed on a 6-point at about 12 yards. Due to my shoulder, I thought I messed something up climbing and prepping a tree because I hadn't done anything in 3.5 months. But anyway, I was up there every night, and it was a great conversation. They did a couple podcasts. They filmed a lot of stuff. Greg and Ernie will have something being posted on Tethered that's going to be quite interesting for everybody. It's kind of out of the norm, so
okay.
I'm not going to spill any beans on that. I'll let that happen. But it was a lot of fun, and you know what? I can't thank the hunting public guys enough because they're bringing public land hunting to light, and they're making it okay for people that hunt public land to kill 80-inch 8-points and little 6-pointers and stuff. A lot of times those guys feel intimidated by all the guys out west in Iowa and Kansas and the TV guys and all the micromanaged land hunters that kill monster bucks all the time. They almost hate shooting something small and showing it to anybody.
Right.
When in reality, it may be the best buck that they have in the area. And so I'm really glad that the hunting public is bringing this public land hunting to light.
Yep. What was the premise of the get-together? Was it just to have a hunting excursion, or was there another point to it?
No, they call it a hunting challenge, but, Aaron kind of runs it. Aaron and Zach from the hunting public kind of run that.
Yep.
And it's not really a challenge. And, I kind of got that from Aaron several times. It's just a get-together where people can kind of go out and hunt and exchange stories, and basically some place where the hunting public can get some footage and film some stuff and get some footage from other hunters that are pretty well known.
Yep.
And, put it on their Facebook page and on their YouTube videos. And obviously Tethered's going to do the same thing. So it's more of a get-together, even though it's called a challenge.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of like deer camp, but heavily weighted with social media.
Yeah, that's a real good analogy, actually.
Okay.
That's perfect.
All right. Because, that's what you do at deer camp anyway, right? You get together, you tell stories, you go hunt, and, there's not a competition, but there is, in a sense. It's not...
Perfectly stated.
Yep.
Absolutely perfectly stated, yes.
Yep. Everybody wants to see, everybody's encouraging, whoever can kill the biggest buck, and if it's you, you're psyched, and you hope it's you, but you don't feel bad for the person that does. But there's always a little ribbing after the fact that, hey, I got it and you didn't, or whatever. It's just, it's part of it.
Hunting's all about egos, so absolutely, no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, that's good.
Anybody that denies that is lying to themselves.
That is correct. That is correct. Well, I'm glad they put that together. It sounds like an interesting get together. Let's talk about some saddle hunting here a little bit. And you came on our show about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and we had a great conversation. We got a lot of feedback on the show. People loved it. Your wealth of knowledge when it comes to the subject matter, and as you said, you probably have been hunting out of a saddle longer than anybody on the planet. So I'd like to kind of go back a little bit and just kind of refresh some of the topics we covered there. How long have you been hunting out of a saddle, and how did you decide that was the way you wanted to start hunting?
Well, in 1981, I started hunting in the mid-'60s, and I became relatively successful for my area, the areas that I was hunting, probably by the mid-'70s. And I was always wanting to up my game. And I went in this sporting goods store, and I saw this thing called the Anderson tree sling. And it was hanging on a shelf nobody in the store knew anything about it or how it worked. It looked like a seat belt gone wrong. It was just a bunch of straps, seatbelt straps, 12 hooked together. And I looked at the pictures, and it looked, it was basically a guy hanging up in a tree, kind of like a consumer's power guy would be hanging up on a telephone pole, or an arborist, cutting branches up in a tree.
Sure.
And I thought, well, that's kind of a unique concept, because I never cared for clanky, noisy, cumbersome tree stands. I hated them.
Right.
Back then, I'd rather get up in a tree and stand on a branch or put a 2x6, crotch of a tree and hunt off that than hunt out of a tree stand. So I bought one, and it was extremely awkward, and I bought it in 1981. It was very awkward, and the first time I, wrapped the lead around the tree and I let go, it was like you think you're going to fall, because it's different. You're facing the tree as opposed to facing away from it like you would in a tree stand or standing on a branch.
Right. And
it was awkward. It wasn't that comfortable because I had the lead as high as I could reach. But in my mind, I was thinking, my God, the advantages of this thing. I can put steps around the tree. I can shoot 360 degrees. I can use the tree as a blocker, between me and the deer, and move around the tree so the deer can't pick me. I can hide behind the tree if I'm hunting at an apple tree or a white oak tree, where there's multiple deer feeding for 20 minutes, and I can totally hide behind the tree, just peek around the side. And then just lean to the side a little bit when I wanted to take my shot. There was no heavy, cumbersome stands to carry. There was never any creaks. It's all fabric, so it's totally 100% quiet. After I used it a while, it became extremely comfortable, way more comfortable than any tree stand. And I tended to hunt higher because once I got comfortable in it, I knew I couldn't fall out of it. You can't fall out of a tree saddle. It's impossible. If you use it correctly, you cannot fall out of a saddle. Nobody ever has. And so I just saw the many advantages, and over the next 2 years, I made some modifications to it. I totally changed the lead strap. I changed the bridge, and I modified it the way I wanted it so it was comfortable to me. And there's two things in my hunting career, that have totally 100% changed my success rate. And the first one was the saddle. The second one was properly learning how to care for and use and store scent-lock activated carbon line clothing. Those two things both made huge surges in my success rate. But the saddle was the first one.
Okay. All right. So you're saying the saddle was instrumental in getting you into areas and having the ability to move around the tree, the ability to be quiet, the ability to pack more lightly, and that the carbon part of that was the second piece of your success.
Yeah, I didn't start using scent-lock till the mid-'90s.
Okay.
So the saddle came 15 years earlier than me using scent-lock. And there's other advantages. The saddle only weighs 1.5 pounds, so you can wear it or you can roll it up. It's the size of a softball. You put it in your backpack. You can prep 40 trees and you hunt the saddle out of every single tree because it's always with you. You don't have to buy a stand for each tree.
Right.
There's way more advantages. There's probably 22 advantages that I can think of that a saddle has over any conventional stand. You can hunt leaning trees, leaning up to 15 degrees. In fact, leaning trees are oftentimes more comfortable to sit in because when the tree's leaning slightly away from you, like you're standing on a ladder, it's just more comfortable to be on it.
Yeah.
And one other thing I gotta throw in there, you definitely shoot more accurately because basically your body weight is distributed into 3 parts. You've got weight on each one of your feet. Each one of your feet is on a step or a platform, a little tiny platform, which I'm not a platform guy. I'm not a big fan of the platforms. And then most of your weight is in your butt. You're sitting in like a little hammock style seat. So when you take a shot, you've got 3 solid contact points to the tree. Whereas when you're in a stand, a lot of times you stand up to shoot and you're balancing on both of your feet. So you're not nearly as stable as you are with a 3-point hitch to the tree where there is no shaking or anything whatsoever.
Right. And I want to add to that in a little bit when I share my experience. It's I think the last time we spoke, I don't know if Tethered had actually come out with their apparatus yet. Do you know if
they had not?
They had not.
Correct.
Okay. I was pretty sure that you were still kind of using your mod stuff, but there were whispers that there was a company that was going to be doing something, and Tethered has since released their products. We had Greg Godfrey on the show and walked through, and because I wanted to do a whole series of interesting new products that had kind of come out, and I did it before Christmas so people could get an understanding of what some of these things were and actually hear from the company themselves or somebody closely connected to it, and really get a breakdown of what this was all about so they could have a better understanding before they bought it, what it was they were buying. And pre-Christmas kind of made sense. So Greg came on the show, we broke it all down, and Greg had since sent me a setup, and it was I'm a 48-year-old overweight dad bod kind of guy. Like I'm 6'1", 230 pounds, muscular build generally speaking. I'm not in the best shape. I'm not in bad shape, but I'm not in the best shape either. I'm not a world-class athlete or anything. So he described my body type to him, and he gave me the setup of what he thought I should have. And he sent it to me, and it sat here on the floor until I think it was about early September that I started playing with it. And I looked at it, tried it on, put it back on the floor. Looked at it again next couple days, played around with some of the connectors, and watched a lot of YouTube videos on how in the heck I was supposed to set this thing up. And it all makes sense. Like it's no different to me than putting on a regular harness or any kind of a safety vest of any sort that you would have hanging from a tree. This setup itself is different, but the complexity of actually putting it together is no different than any of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, it would be kind of like putting on a climbing harness to prep trees with if you're putting in steps and stuff.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of similar to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. It's as far as a safety harness, it's different than a safety harness because when you're in a tree stand, you've got a safety harness basically coming off the tree and it's going into the back of your jacket. So That's another cool thing about a saddle. A saddle is connected down at your waist. Basically, you're like sitting in a little diaper.
Right.
So there's nothing above the waist.
Right.
On like the Mantis saddle. So if you want to change your upper clothing and, change your layers and stuff as it gets colder or as it warms up in the morning, it's really simple to do, to just take off your jacket, add or take stuff off. Whereas in a tree stand with a safety harness strapped against the tree going down your jacket, you got to undo everything, take off your jacket, change your stuff out, and then put it back on. But other than that, it's very simple. It's just like looking at a lineman guy up, or a guy up on a telephone pole for consumers.
Right. Yes, it's the same kind of concept. I think we should break it down a little bit more. But one of the things that kind of came to mind, and I've heard you say this a few times. I mean, it's great to have a hunting apparatus that you can get up in the tree with, but it isn't going to do you any good unless the deer are there, right? It doesn't matter how good your harness is, or how good your setup is, or how neat it is. If the deer aren't there, it doesn't matter. So
that's pretty much the truth.
Right? You can have
absolutely.
You can have the prettiest swing in baseball, but if you can't hit the ball, it doesn't matter. So how do you decide like where to hunt? And I've heard you mention a couple times now that you actually go out and, unlike, well, I guess very much like somebody that has a stand, a hang-on stand, or even putting up a ladder, they're going to prep the area. So it sounds like you actually scout areas. You do pre-installment of your setup. You're trimming branches. You're trimming trees. Is this a requirement that you have to go into these spots each and every time and make sure that you like that spot and that there are actually deer there?
No, that's not a requirement. That's my preference. Right. Obviously, if you can go in, I do all my scouting. Well, I'm not going to say all, but I do 96, 98% of all my scouting and location preparation during February, March, and April.
Okay.
So I'm looking at last year's signs. So I will go into every season with approximately 40 trees that are prepped. Some may be on public land where on public land, you're really limited to what you can do. You're not supposed to cut branches and stuff, but I'll cut weeds and trim weeds and clear stuff back on public land and prep it as well as I can so that when I do go to that tree, it's pretty simple for me to put the strap on stuff up the tree, just go up there and hunt.
Okay.
But if I have the option and I'm on private land, because everything I do is public land and knock on doors for free permission. I've never hunted any land that anybody owns that I know. Never hunted managed land. It's all been public land or knock on doors or free walk on.
Okay.
So if I get permission from a farmer and he lets me, I'll put screw-in steps, and I've even had farmers let me put in spikes, where I'll buy 50-pound boxes of 60D spikes. They're big, like pole barn spikes, and
Sure.
I'll put spikes in the tree, so that tree's ready to hunt at any time for 10 years.
Right.
If you put in screw-ins, you usually have to take the screw-in steps out every 3 years and reinstall them because they grow in and they get kind of funky. So.
True.
But when you go into season, it's much easier to have a lot of locations ready. And then when a location's hot, it's there and it's ready to hunt. You're hunting everything out of a single saddle. I've hunted out of the same exact sling since 1981.
Right.
So, and it was $100. So
right.
all the trees, and I've probably prepped it a minimum of 500 trees in that time frame have been hunted out of a single sling. And the reason I use spikes when a farmer lets me is because they're cheap. You can buy a 50-pound box of spikes, and I use a cordless drill a hole, and put them in. I can buy a 50-pound box of spikes for like $100, and there's 300 spikes.
Right.
Versus paying, I use Cranford screw-ins, so those Cranford, they're $5 a piece. So it's a lot cheaper, to use the spikes than it is the steps.
So
but having a lot of trees prepped is a great idea. And when I'm postseason scouting, I prep trees that I have no idea. I may prep something next to an apple tree or next to a white oak or next to a red oak or something, let's say on a crop field edge, there's this primary scrape area from the year before. I may prep a tree there, not knowing if the apple tree is going to have apples or the white oak or the red oaks are going to have acorns or if the crop field is going to be in standing corn. Because if I prep a scrape area and then that field is in anything short cropped like hay or beans, I won't hunt it because a big buck in Michigan, because we have so much hunting pressure, is not going to be exposed during daylight hours with a big field in front of him.
Right.
But if it's in standing corn where he's got security cover to security cover, he'll come in and he'll work those scrapes in the daytime.
Okay.
And then what I'll do is I'll go out and I'll check all my early season locations. I'll do what I call a speed tour.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do that usually after September 20th, and Michigan season opens October 1. So by September 20th, all of the 3.5-year-old and older bucks have been rubbed out probably for 3 weeks. They're usually rubbed out by the 1st of September. So that means if I go and let's say 20, I check 20 of my early season locations, which are all going to be at food locations or scrape areas from the year before. So obviously, if the trees don't have acorns or they don't have apples or the scrapes aren't active, obviously those are not going to get hunted. The ones that do have apples or acorns, or if there is an active scrape area and it's next to standing corn, the food locations, typically, if there's doe activity that's been in there feeding at them, there's going to be some kind of buck rubs or scrapes at those feeding locations as well. So I may have 20 early season locations that I go and check with my speed tour, and I'm wearing total scent lock when I'm doing it, so I'm not leaving any odor. I'm not there to prepare anything. I'm just there looking to see what kind of activity's there. Yep. Out of 20 trees, there may be 5 or 6 that I'm going to hunt that year because they have the adequate sign and they are actually dropping food. So that's kind of how I work it. And then the other half of my locations are rut phase only locations. They're going to be back in interiors of bedding areas or primary scrape areas, back in the brush, and everything revolves around security cover. If there's no perimeter security cover around a kill zone at any location, I won't set it up.
Gotcha.
It has to have perimeter security cover, and it has to have transition security cover to a known bedding area. So in other words, if there's an apple tree and it's got good perimeter security cover around it, let's say there's brush and weeds all around it, but for a deer to get from a bedding area to that apple tree or oak tree, he has to go through 100 yards of open timber, mature timber with no understudy, that spot will be worthless, because a mature buck is not going to walk through that open, vulnerable area to access that food spot in daylight hours.
Right. Okay. That makes total sense. When you decide that, let's say you've got so many preseason trees already prepped from the scouting that you've done earlier in the year, postseason, and you ever got to a spot and the tree that you picked out isn't the ideal tree, like it's the right spot, but that tree over there is better than this one, and boy, I wish I had set that one up. Does that ever occur? Are you pretty solid on that's the correct tree for this area?
Usually it's the correct tree, but absolutely. There's been times where, I need to move 20 or 30 yards. I've had locations in the past where I've had 4 trees within 30 yards of each other because I kept moving trees. And, 1 year, one tree might be better than the other, which is kind of weird. And I'm talking, these trees are all prepared. And I do a lot of freelancing too. So, if things aren't working out, I'll freelance. If I'm not seeing much, I'll totally freelance. I've shot a lot of my book bucks just freelancing, where I just go in with my stuff and just find the activity and jump up in a tree and hunt. So.
And I think that's kind of where I was going with this, is that, there's the sign earlier in the year and you kind of expect it to be a good area, but then that the sign might not be there at that time, that's why you constantly scout. At least in my mind, you should always be scouting and go where the activity is most.
If you've got enough locations prepped, I'm hunting 37 acres. I got 14 locations prepped on 37 acres.
Yep.
There's 2 other guys hunting it. I've killed 6 book bucks off that 37 acres. The other 2 guys have never killed one, and they've hunted it 20 years, and I've hunted it 10.
Gotcha.
You've got right locations, and they're in the right spots. Typically, you don't have to prep another tree, but like if I'm in a tree, and 37 acres is a pretty small parcel. If I'm in a tree and I've got permission on 200 acres, or I'm on public land, which is thousands of acres, and it's not panning out like I thought it should, and I see activity, 150 yards in a different direction, absolutely, I will get down and move. My biggest buck, which was a 180-incher, that's exactly how I shot him. I got down and moved in midday and shot him in the evening.
Okay. You're not afraid to move. The freelance, as you described it.
Oh,
You're willing to adapt to the situation in the area.
You always have to adapt. But the cool thing about the sling is you can prep enough trees that it's rare that you don't have a tree already in the right position. Unlike tree stands where, every time you prep a tree, you got a 100 or whatever cost tree stand and sticks and all that stuff, and or else if you're carrying a stand with you all the time, you got to make the noise of bringing it in and setting it up, and it's just not as easy with a saddle. It makes freelancing way more easier.
And I think that's what's so attractive to me about the harness. Provided that it's comfortable enough, it's very attractive to freelance, like really, really attractive. And there's not a lot of extra prep work except for maybe the tree itself, if you can get away with it. It seems like it's the ideal freelancer device in my mind.
It is, and kind of that's kind of what the majority of people that are saddle hunting are getting into, is they're a lot of freelance guys. Yeah. And the comfort is all in how you use it. If you're a guy and you buy a saddle and you don't hook it up correct, a lot of times some of these videos show reaching up as high as you can reach and wrapping your lead strap around the tree. And if you do that, you're going to be uncomfortable because that lead strap's coming right down in front of your face because it's at such a steep angle. I always put my lead strap about nose level around the tree, where it's coming down to my waist at a 45-degree angle. So I'm more leaning back into the saddle as opposed to all my weight straight down in it with the lead way up over my head. Okay. So there's definitely ways to hunt in a saddle that are more comfortable than others, and you kind of have to play with it, and also your steps. I like my steps 8 inches apart going around the tree. That way they're very short movements. I can control my movements so I don't have anything rigid, because usually when you're moving around a tree, it's when something's coming close. You're moving to get in position.
Yeah.
So, with a platform, a lot of guys like platforms, but that puts your body 18 inches away from the tree because your feet are typically on the front of the platform. I like the steps because then my legs are somewhat straddling the tree and my body is kind of blended right into the tree.
Right.
And then when I want to move around the tree, it's very easy to just move around on those steps around the back. Whereas if you got your feet on the front of a platform, it's 18 inch. The platform is 18 inches deep, and you go to move around the back of the tree. That's a pretty long, rigid movement. And a lot of times, if people don't put the steps properly, gravity has to take over your body for a brief millisecond till your body swings around into that position. And when you got a deer coming in on you, if you can't control your movements, your odds of getting picked are pretty high.
Yep, gotcha. So let's kind of break it down as far as getting into the tree. You've talked about spikes, and if you have permission to do some more invasive type structure to get in, but generally speaking, and on public land, you can't cut stuff, you can't drill into stuff, and I think
not generally speaking, 100% of the time, there isn't any public land you can scar the tree.
Yeah, and the reason I say generally is that, like, in New Hampshire, for example, and I think it's different than Michigan, is that we have the land use laws that go back to colonial days. So if it's not posted, you can hunt it. You're free to roam, as opposed to, and I'm not exactly sure what Michigan's like, but if I'm assuming that if you don't own it, you can't hunt it. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of the impression I was getting.
It's true. If you don't hunt it, if you don't own it, you can't hunt it. It doesn't necessarily have to be posted.
Okay.
Because all public land is posted as such.
Okay. So in New Hampshire, it's a little different. There's vast areas that are public but are owned privately, but you don't need permission per se. You should often get permission, but it's the opposite. So if it's posted, then you can't hunt it, as opposed to if it's not posted, then you can. So in New Hampshire, you can hunt it if it's not posted, period. Now,
gotcha.
That being said, it's considered public land, and you cannot drill, you cannot cut or do any of that stuff unless you have landowner permission. Then you actually need the permission to do all that stuff. So in that sense, it's identical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how are you on public land getting up and down the tree? And I'm looking at steps for the most part. There are multiple ways to do it. How are you doing it?
Personally, I use Cranford. They're called strap-on rope steps.
Okay.
Basically, it's a rope. It's a metal step. It's a folding step. It folds up, and there's a rope that goes around the tree. It hooks on a hook on the other side of the step, and then it's got a little thing you pull, and it snugs it up to the tree. And they go on 20 seconds, maybe you can put one on a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll typically carry about 14 of those, and those will get me up to 25 feet. And then up at the top, I'm using something that came out that's pretty new. It's called a Cranford saddle scaffold ring of step. So it's on a ratchet, and they are using a ratchet just for liability purposes. A lot of guys are taking the steps off and putting it on a cam lock strap. That way it doesn't make any noise, because a ratchet strap does make some noise. But those are folding steps as well. They'll go on any strap, and you just prior to tightening it down, you slide the steps around the strap exactly where you want them around the tree, and then you finish tightening it down. So that's your ring at the top.
Okay. Why that over the ladder sticks, for example, or
to me, sticks are cumbersome.
Okay.
I don't hunt out of a tree stand because I wanted to get away from the cumbersome. And usually, when you're hunting public land, you're going through brush and junk, and that stuff just gets hung up on stuff. Now there's a ton of guys online now that are using these little one-section sticks. They got 2 steps on them, maybe 3. They're really short. Mm-hmm. And then they use aiders, which is something you put on them and gives you a couple fabric steps down below.
Yep.
And those are becoming very, very popular. I've never used them, so I can't really speak intelligently about them. I've just used strap-ons, the Cranford strap-ons, for years. So
okay,
that's all I can say.
That's funny
about what I use.
Yep, it's funny.
I have a lot of.
Go ahead.
I have a lot of strap-on sticks. I've had companies send me, sticks, climbing sticks for years. So I've got a garage full of climbing sticks, but I've never ever used any because they're just too cumbersome for me to carry. But I'm talking about the ones that are 3 foot long. They got 4 steps on them, and most of these guys you see on YouTube now, they're using real short pieces and aluminum and with steel steps and stuff like that.
Yep.
So And they're kind of expensive, but a lot of guys are using them now. I haven't yet. So.
Okay. Well, it's funny you say that. I have a garage full of these things too. They'll send me one to review it and use it and see what I think about it. And so I have a similar problem. I am using them because I haven't gone to the Cranford step. But it's funny. I'm looking up Cranford as we're talking, and it's funny you say that because I have seen Cranford steps on Amazon and seen people using them for saddle hunting, and I like the design. And it's funny because I have this like precursor to this metal step that I use as my bow hanger, and it was just this plastic step. They probably don't make them anymore because they probably ended up being not safe enough. They weren't sturdy enough.
The strap-on?
The strap-on, yep.
Yeah, it was made by Ameristep, and they got sued, and they quit making those.
There you go.
You're correct.
But they make great bow hangers, is what I found out. They're really light.
Yep.
So I kept that, and it becomes my bow hanger, and I just put a little clip on up at the top, and I can hang whatever I need to, and it's really lightweight, and it doesn't add any poundage. And it frustrated me because I had it hung in with a ladder stand at one point, and somebody stole my ladder stand, so I had to go get my steps to go back up to get that, because it was still at the top of the ladder stand. They took the ladder stand, but they didn't take the Ameristep plastic strap that I had also hung there. For some reason, they didn't want that, but I had to get out my all the aluminum steps that people had sent me so I could go retrieve that, and now it's become my bow hanger no matter where I go. And because they don't make them anymore, I can't buy them anymore, and that was the only one I had.
I have a set of those, and if you find them online, they go for a pretty good penny because they're really nice. I think what happened is probably during really cold weather, somebody that was a little heavier, that's plastic. It's made out of the same stuff they make football helmets out of. So it's not just plastic. There's a term for it, but it's a strong plastic.
Right.
And I think somebody put all their weight on the tip end of the step instead of keeping their weight against the tree where the step butts up to the tree.
Right. Yeah. It's a durable plastic.
And they got sued.
Yeah.
And Ameristep also makes screw-in steps, but they're very, very difficult to start. That's one thing you'll find about Cranford. Cranford steps start and go in the tree extremely easily.
Okay. All right.
I can put his Cranford step in 15 seconds.
So you're a Cranford guy. You like the screw-in steps and you like the strap-ons to get up and down.
Everything they do is made in USA. Their pivot points are made out of solid steel. All the other folding steps in the past have been hollow rivet-style pivot points, and they bend, they break. My son Chris bent 4 of them, and he weighs 150 pounds.
Okay.
Cranfords have case-hardened pivot points in them, and they're just durable. They're not going to make anything that's ever going to fail.
Gotcha. All right. That makes sense. All right. Very cool.
Which is a big deal.
All right. So they're lightweight. How much do they weigh per unit, roughly?
Oh, my God. I would guess a rope step weighs, 7 ounces maybe.
Wow. Okay.
That's a guess, but I don't think it would be any more than that at the most.
Gotcha. All right. So you're really walking in there with about, if you're carrying 14, a little over 7 pounds worth of steps. And that's definitely lighter.
Yeah, probably with the scaffold ring. And what I do is I always carry a backpack full of a bunch of junk. And so I will have what I call freelance fanny pack.
Yep.
And I wear that underneath my backpack. So when I get to a tree, I'll take off my backpack, lay it on the ground next to my bow, and then I'll put the lineman belt on my saddle. That's your safety strap for climbing the tree, and I use that for prepping the tree. And I'll spin that fanny pack around to the front, and the fanny pack I have has 2 side pockets and 1 big pocket in the front. So on the side pockets is what I put my steps in, and some in the front as well. And as I go up the tree, I just take one out of each side and put them on the tree. And when I get up to the top, I put on the ring of steps because that's in the big front pocket, and put on a couple bow holders. And then I hang a rope, and then I climb back down and hook my bow to the rope, put my backpack on, and just go up the tree and hunt.
Gotcha. Okay. So my setup that I was given by Tethered, and Tethered's not a sponsor of the show. I don't know if they're a sponsor of yours, but they're not of ours. But they were generous enough to send us one of these units for me to try. And I tried the platform. I looked at it. It's small. It's intimidating because I'm used to the heavier duty hanging tree stands. I'm usually putting something in the tree that's weighs probably, I don't even know, it's 20 pounds versus whatever this thing weighs, which is practically nothing. Right?
Yeah, it weighs less than 2 pounds.
Right. So I'm like, how on earth is this going to hold my 230-pound body and feel comfortable? And here's the deal. I did a lot of YouTube research. I played with it, the saddle at the house. The first time I ever used it, I went in the dark and actually hunted out of it. I did not practice. Now, I'm not recommending that anybody does that, but I wanted to see how easy it was to do if I just went in cold. And I have climbed with sticks before, so that part I was comfortable with. I've used lineman ropes before. That part I was comfortable with. But actually, I set the stand up, and I put it in the tree, and I'm completely connected to the tree at this point. And I put it, and I just remembering from what I had on YouTube, set it up, put it down, and I stood on it. And I was like, and as that foot touched it, I was like, oh boy, here we go. But I put my tether in. I followed the instructions exactly, and so it was solid. I could not believe how solid it was.
Well, that rope is 7,000-pound test,
Yep.
and that platform, it's ridiculously strong because it's a one-piece molded. There's no welded joints or anything like that. It's very, very strong.
I was blown away. So with the tether in, with my lineman belt on, I'm stepping onto the platform. And I'm full on stepping up. Like, there's no weight really connected to the tether or my lineman belt at that point, and it fully held me, no problem. Like, it was astonishing how strong it was.
Yep.
So,
they're very strong. They've had them tested, and they're stronger than almost any tree stand that's ever been made.
It was incredibly impressive. So from
got to keep in mind it's shorter, and the closer it is to the tree, the less leverage it's going to have on the end.
Right. That's good. Very good
point. The longer farther way out you are from the tree, the more leverage you're putting if you're standing on close to the end of it.
Right. So you don't use the platform. You like the steps. You like the circular steps.
I like the platform is comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about killing deer.
Right.
I like to be comfortable, but I think that platform over time will cost people deer because the large body movement you have to make moving around to the backside of the tree, and also your body being basically 2 foot away from the tree as opposed to straddling the tree when the foliage is down, you're just much more apt to get picked by a mature deer. Obviously, if you're just hunting subordinate bucks and does and fawns, yeah, you're probably okay. But your old matriarch does and your big bucks, if there's something sticking out away from the tree, 2 foot, a big body, and it's in their vision, you're gonna get picked. I mean, maybe not in Kansas or Iowa or Nebraska, but if you're in a PA or a New York or West Virginia or Michigan, where there's lots of hunting pressure, and most of the deer that are 3 years old and older have been shot before and have wounds, they look for hunters in trees. So the closer you can keep your body profile to the tree or around the backside of the tree, the better. And with that platform, if you're tied to that platform, obviously as the deer going by, you can't move your body around to the back side of the tree and keep the tree between you and the deer because you're basically locked into being on the platform.
Yep. So
it's all about killing. As long as I'm comfortable, I want to be in the best killing situation I can be.
Okay.
And there's no doubt in my mind that having steps around the tree where my legs are somewhat straddling the tree as opposed to having a platform where my feet are on the edge of the front of the platform, and the platform is 18 inches long, so my body is way far away from the tree. That's just something sticking out a lot that's much more apt to get picked by a mature deer.
Okay. All right. So you think
the platforms are nice and most people like it, so I'm not saying anything negative against that. I'm just about me.
Well, we're not saying negative things, but you have a preference. Okay. Some people have a preference, and there is another option. You prefer the other option. Got it.
And also with a platform, what it almost forces you to do, that people have these names for shots, okay? Mm-hmm. A strong shot, a drop shot, a weak shot, which I think is kind of ridiculous, but that's what they've termed this stuff.
The weak side shot, right? Yep.
Basically, if you're right-handed, and let's say you're facing the tree, and a deer comes in on your right-hand side, What they call that is a weak shot, where most YouTube videos show you lifting your bow over your lead strap, which is in front of you, and then contorting your body and shooting to your right-hand side, to your 3 o'clock, let's say.
Yep.
And you've got to keep in mind, if a deer is at your 3 o'clock, your body profile is away from the tree, okay?
Yep.
And you're making all these movements where you are in clear vision of that deer. In other words, your body is on the same side of the tree, basically, as the deer is. And that should never happen out of the saddle. When you're hunting out of the saddle, your body should always be, if you're going to shoot at a deer, the tree trunk should always be between you and the deer, where you're just leaning to the side of the tree and taking your shot. So for me, as opposed to being on the platform and doing that weak shot, going over the top of the lead and contorting my body, which contorts your anchor point, it contorts your draw length, it contorts everything, makes the shot very difficult. As I see the thing coming to fruition, the deer coming in, I swing around, I move around the tree to my left. So I've got the tree trunk between me and the deer. And then when the shot opportunity, and I'm just peeking around the corner, the side of the edge of the tree, and when the shot happens, I just slightly slide to the side and take the shot, where probably only 1/4 to 1/3 of my body is exposed from behind the trunk of the tree.
Okay, so
to me, it's all about killing. It's not about looking cool. People wear face paint to look cool because they make nice, neat patterns, and people do things to look cool. To me, it's all about killing big bucks.
Right.
So whatever works best for me that's what I do.
So you're using the tree as a way to hide. You're keeping out of the visual 100%. Of the deer.
Yes.
Okay. Until the last possible moment when you have to expose yourself somewhat, but you're relying on your I guess a stealth position. Even in the tree, you got there in a stealth kind of way. You're in the tree, but you're still staying stealth in the tree, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but I've turned that weak shot into what they call a strong shot. I never take a weak shot. All my shots are strong shots. I always am shooting to my left.
To your left,
where I can take a strong shot. It's not going to affect my anchor point. I can come to full draw, and when I say lean out to the side of the tree, it's a very, very, very slight lean, and obviously I'm peeking around the corner at the deer, so I do it when the deer's attention is elsewhere.
Okay. Your
body is on the same side of the tree. It's probably pretty hard to make a big movement without the deer noticing it.
Gotcha. So you're facing the tree, and you're moving to the left of the tree for the shot.
If a deer's coming in from, let's say, 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock, yeah, if I see that deer at 5 o'clock, I'm moving around to the back side of the tree, and as that deer comes into 3 o'clock, I'm sliding back around a little bit to my right. So I move way around to the left, almost to the back side, and then as it slides around to my 3 o'clock, which is what I want for a broadside shot, I'll slide back around to my right a little bit, and then when the shot presents itself, or else it goes past the 3 o'clock into the 2 o'clock, where now I got a quartering away shot, I just slightly, which is typically what I would do, because now the deer's facing kind of away from me, and I got a better shot with a quartering away, then I'll just slightly lean and take the shot.
So you're leaning to, you've circled around to the left, but then you're leaning to the right to take the shot that, as they're describing, is the weak side shot, but to you it's the strong.
No, you got it a little bit. When I see the deer coming from my 5 o'clock, I'm seeing this at a little bit of a distance. And because my legs are kind of straddling the tree, I just slightly move around. I move around 180 degrees to the back side of the tree.
Gotcha.
Move around on my step.
Okay.
And then as the deer comes to what was my 3 o'clock when I was in my original position, so the deer is coming by at what would have been my 3 o'clock, I will slightly move back to my right towards my original position. I'll slightly move back. And then when it gets to my 2 o'clock or my 1 o'clock, I'll just then lean off to the side and take that shot. So the tree trunk is between me and the deer pretty much all the time.
All the time. So you're just leaning to one side or the other. But you prefer the shot, and I'm still trying to visualize this. I know this is audio, but you're trying to take a shot to the right of the tree. Is that correct?
I'm always wanting my shot as a right-hander. I always want my shot to be to my left.
To your left, okay.
I never want, as a right-hander, for my shot to be to my right.
Gotcha. All right.
Because that way I have to contort my body to take that shot.
It is a more difficult shot.
I never want my body to be between the tree and the deer. I want my body to be behind the tree all the time.
Right, which means that you really need to take that shot from the left side of the tree. Okay.
Yeah. And it's all, anytime you're taking a shot to your left, it's going to be a strong shot for a right-hander.
Yep. Okay.
And on a left-hander, your strong shot's going to be to the right side of the tree.
Right. Got it.
There was one time I took what they term now as a weak shot.
Yeah.
And there was a doe in heat ran by me. I was right on the edge of a standing cornfield with red oaks down the edge, and a doe ran by me and ran into the corn. And this 23-inch wide 10-point came running up and he was 6 yards, and he stopped underneath the oaks. He did not want to go into the corn because the corn rows were going the opposite direction. I don't think she was in heat. I think she was close. And for some odd reason, he stopped. And I did not have time to move around the tree. It all happened in just a millisecond. And I just lifted and I'm 30 feet up in this tree. So him being at 6 yards, I wasn't that worried about him picking me because I was basically over his head. And I lifted my bow up over my lead and swung around and took that shot. And that's a very, very difficult shot. It worked for me because I practiced that shot. It's not a shot I like taking. And of the 44 bucks I've got in the record book that I've taken out of a saddle, I've got 50 total, but 44 were out of a saddle. That's the only one that's ever been a weak shot.
Okay. So you're 99-point-something% taking strong side shots to the left as opposed to trying to do the weak side shots for a right-hander to the right.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. That makes total sense to me after doing what I did the other day. Just trying this. So I'm coming from a standpoint where bow hunting is popular in where I am, but we really wait for snow so we can track deer using a firearm on foot. Very rarely are we hanging out of trees. Like, this is just not something that the people from Maine and New Hampshire typically do. They usually wait for snow. Like, that's like the quintessential style of hunting that New Englanders like to do.
The Benoit way.
The Benoit way. That's exactly right. Lane was a very, very, very good friend of mine. I was working with him just prior to him passing on his final project, and wasn't supposed to be his final project. It was supposed to be his latest project, and we were working together on it, and then he passed suddenly. But yes, that's the Benoit way is the way that I've more or less adopted. So hanging from trees other than from tree stands, this is a brand new concept to me. But I got to tell you, John, I think I've fallen in love with the whole concept and the feeling that you get when you're up there and the idea of how you get in and out. Like, I wish I had done this 30 years ago.
Everybody says that.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that Tethered is really doing that's different from anybody else that's been in this category before, is Tethered has got a pretty healthy pro staff, and basically all over the country, these pro staffers in the summer are putting on these little clinics where they're for free. It's welcome for anybody to come, and these pro staffers are teaching people how to properly set up in a saddle, how to sit, how to comfortably move around the tree. And boy, I would suggest anybody that's looking at getting a saddle to keep their eye on Tethered and, watch their Facebook page, because they always post that stuff well in advance of when it's going to happen.
Yep.
Because if you buy a saddle and you don't have somebody show you how to use it correctly, it might not be that comfortable when you first start using it. If you use it a while and you stick to it because you know all the advantages and you want to learn how to use it, you'll figure it out. But my God, when Trophy Line first came out with their saddle, I would bet money 50% of the people that bought them used them once and never used them again because they were just uncomfortable, but they were only uncomfortable because they didn't know how to properly use them. It's just like scent lock. If you don't know how to properly care and use and store scent lock, it's not going to work for you.
Gotcha.
So, properly learning how to use something makes a big difference in how it actually functions.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because my compadre here in New Hampshire, who I hunt with quite a bit, I mentioned to him that I had this saddle. I was going to give it a shot. And he goes, "Oh, I tried that 20 years ago, and I gave it away because I bought one, and it was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever hunted in." So I was skeptical, right away. I'm like, "Oh man, here we go." So now I went in blind. Like I said, I went in day one, didn't practice, went in the dark, and actually hunted out of it right away. And I could not have been more comfortable. I could not believe the comfort level that I was experiencing, where I'm waiting for this to become uncomfortable at some point. I'm 20 minutes in, I'm 30 minutes in, I'm 2 hours in. I'm like, I've never been so comfortable in a tree.
Yeah, I fall asleep in mine all the time.
Yeah, I was kicking back. This is fantastic. Oh, I'm wearing I'm using a compound bow. I have.
Can I ask you ask you how much you weigh? If
Yes,
you mind?
I weigh 230 pounds.
Because Tethered gets emails from people or Facebook responses. Well, how much can I weigh and still use this? And I work with a guy from Ohio that's 260. He's 6'6", and he's a big man, ex-Marine, and he loves it. So as long as you learn how to use it properly, weight is not an issue. As long as you can climb the tree.
I was concerned of that. I'm not a small guy, and my friend has said, only skinny guys hunt out of saddles, and I said, well, I'm not that, so I'm going to give it a shot anyway. But I was wearing my ghillie suit. I climbed up using my sticks. I had the platform. I had it tethered in correctly. I took off my lineman's belt, and then I sat down, and it was heavenly. This is from what my friend told me. This is not what he experienced. This is.
You watched the right videos, obviously.
Apparently, I did, because I did make sure I got it connected right. But I hadn't hung from a tree yet, and that was in the I'm looking at the bridge, and the bridge is this really thin rope. They tell me it holds a Jeep. It's 5,000-pound test or something like that.
Well, it's not that thin. It's a half-inch diameter nylon rope,
and it doesn't look like it should hold me. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're talking about the bridge.
The bridge. Yeah, not the tether.
The bridge is made out of am steel.
Yeah.
That's God, I think that's over 7,000-pound test.
But you're looking at this bridge, and you're like, the tethered line is thick. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's going to hold me. Lineman's belt, yeah, that looks great. But I look at the bridge, I'm like, I don't know. But I connected it, and, man, that thing, no problem. Absolutely no problem. I'm sliding, I can move from side to side. The carabiner is moving over the carabiner nice and smooth. And what really blew me away is how subtle your movements can be and how effective you can be without being herky-jerky. You can really subtly move with a smoothness that you can't necessarily do because you're just used to moving quickly.
Yep. Well, keep in mind, do you fish?
Yes, I fish quite a bit.
Okay. If you've ever used braid like Fireline from Berkeley,
yes.
Basically am steel is the same stuff. It's Dyneema.
Okay.
And basically, thread for thread diameter, it's stronger than steel. It's called am steel. The stuff is just. I agree with you though. Even at my weight, first time I got in a mantis, and I'm looking at that, because I think that's 1/4 inch.
Right.
But imagine a 1/4 inch diameter Fireline. That's how strong it is. I can pull my boat with 6-pound test Fireline.
Right. You're
I'm hooked on a log or something.
You're right. So
it's pretty strong stuff. It's not going to break.
That's a great way to think about it. If you can pull your boat with some fishing line, and this stuff is that stuff, and it's a 1/4 inch thick, darn right it's going to hold you and 10 times you, 20 times you, if you're a 230-pound man.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you have no worries.
Yeah.
Something else will fail before that does, that's for sure.
Right.
And also, a lot of these videos you watch are for people that don't have a clue what they're doing. They've never killed anything out of it.
Yep.
When you watch videos and you see these guys and they got their foot up on the side of the tree and their bodies are perpendicular to the tree when they're taking a shot downward, it almost makes it look like you got to be a gymnast to hunt out of it. And that is so far from the truth. You should never, ever be in an awkward position when you're shooting at a deer.
Right.
Your feet should both be planted firmly on steps or the platform, and you should never have to put your foot up on the side of a tree.
Right. So, yeah,
I never have.
I haven't yet. I've only done it once, but I'm I'm not a gymnast. I'm definitely not a gymnast. I don't bend very well.
I'm glad you said that your weight and that you were comfortable, because they get asked that question all the time.
Yeah. And, on a good day, I'm probably pushing 235, somewhere between 230 and 235, 6 feet tall, and thick legs. I've got a power lifter body when it comes down to it.
Okay. Ever think about getting into cage fighting?
No. Like I said, I don't bend well, and when things go to bend, it does. I can pick things up and put them down, but when I start to try to move out of a certain other position, it didn't work well. Now, that being said, I truly enjoyed being able to stretch out my calves or leaning back, and I could really get a good calf and leg stretch out of those things. I was finding ways to do yoga in the tree stand while I was in there, and I felt like it relaxed me. There you could do things hanging from that tree you can't really do any other way. And
I am so glad you mentioned that, Jay, because I didn't even think about that. But that is a huge, huge factor. Because did you have the rope man, or were you using the Prusik knot adjuster?
I had the Prusik knot.
Okay. The cool thing about a saddle is you can adjust how much you drape. At any point in time, within a couple of seconds, you can let a little bit of your lead out so that you got more weight in your butt. Or if your butt's getting sore and you want to put more weight on your feet, you just lift your weight up and slide the Prusik knot up the lead rope, and now you got more weight up on your feet and you're standing more upright. Mm-hmm. You can change how you sit, how you drape in literally moments. And on an all-day sit, that's a big deal, because if you sit on a tree stand in the same position all day, stuff starts falling asleep.
Yeah, right.
Body parts, your legs fall asleep because you got pressure points on the front edge of the seat.
Right. Nothing fell. My limbs fall asleep in my seat in the office, or in my podcast studio. My legs will fall asleep. And some of these new stands with the mesh seats, and some of these tree stands, I haven't had any issues there. Nothing fell asleep at all. Not even close to falling asleep when I was in the sling. It was, like I said, it was kind of like doing yoga. I'm constantly being able to readjust and feel comfortable. There's never a point where, and again, I'm not promoting any of this stuff necessarily, but I'm just having a full-fledged, honest conversation. What I experienced, I was never, ever uncomfortable. Nothing fell asleep. Nothing even felt out of place. I had never been so comfortable just being in a tree. I've been in tree stands where I just couldn't get comfortable. Metal platforms that I just couldn't get comfortable, but this was different.
If there's a couple guys that are on a lot of these Facebook replies and stuff, and there's one guy, and he has got a really bad back. He's had a couple back surgeries, and he can't hunt out of a tree stand, and he can sit in his saddle all day. He said, I couldn't hunt out of trees until I got a saddle.
Yeah, it truly is mind-blowing. Okay, so I'm in the tree stand. I'm watching porcupines walk around all over the place. They're coming in and chasing each other, and each porcupine gets bigger. And I was thinking,
a good hunt, huh?
It was a great hunt. I couldn't believe it. And it's the sun came up and it's chilly. It's 35 degrees or something like that. And I'd walked into the spot, and I was in a spot that I had scouted routinely on snow during tracks. I tracked many deer into this area, and I kind of knew now where their bedding was just from learning everything on snow. Like that, I knew for sure that I was most likely going to see a deer. In fact, I was in that area the night before just doing some scouting from the ground, seeing what was going on, and a deer had walked down this path. And it was about 70 yards away from where I was. I was up against a very thick old maple tree, and I was checking out some oyster mushrooms that were growing about 8 feet high off of it. And I was thinking, I'm going to come back and get those. And I had my bow, but it was more of a scouting observation hunt. I wasn't really planning to kill anything that night, but I did see what was a small buck move through this area, and I knew that if I was going to hunt that spot, I had to get closer. So I had picked out a tree that night, and then I got out of there. Went back first thing in the morning. Porcupines everywhere. Got up in the sling. As I said, I was as comfortable as I've ever been in any tree. And around 8:30 in the morning, And again, it's cold, it's brisk, it's high pressure. It's blue skies. It's perfect, ideal conditions for deer to move in the morning. And I look up, and there are 4 deer coming down the hill towards me, and it's a sharp decline. Like there's the hill where the hill starts is 50 yards from me, but they were coming down that hill, and I could see them coming. And I'm hanging from the tree, but I'm fully exposed. I have a ghillie suit on, and I'm hanging from the tether with my feet on the platform, so I'm out away from the tree. And as you described, there were 3 of the deer were juveniles. There was 1 monarch doe that came down the hill, and she picked me up right away. She knew something was up, but they kept coming. The deer, the younger deer, walked right by me, right underneath me, and the monarch doe came down, and she was hanging back, but she still kind of came through. Like, I'm okay, and I froze, and I let them still walk through, but she definitely picked me up, and
she kept her eye on you.
She kept her eye on me, and they came back. They went through, but then they circled around, went back up the hill. They weren't quite sure what it was, but then they came back down through again. So it was just an interesting interaction that, yes, I got picked up. I don't know if it was the ghillie suit or what, but that I had, in 24 hours, I'd done it. Well, I can't say in 24 hours, but I knew that was a spot because I'd done my homework. I knew every single deer track around this area always led to this one little bowl of goodness where everything kind of ended up, where there were beds and cover and places to come from out of a feeding area. And I just kind of knew their travel routes. So I knew that there was a good chance, seen the deer there the night before. But in 24 hours, picked out a tree, got up in a stand, and could have shot a doe if I wanted to. So
that's awesome.
It is awesome. And I'm like, this all happened in one night, going in cold. So all in 24 hours, I set up, and I've got 4 deer underneath me at 10 yards, and they had no idea, and they were still comfortable with me there.
Yep.
Now,
it's a good feeling.
It's a great feeling. Like, this is crazy, and I was comfortable up until that point, and the excitement just blew my mind, and I know that a lot of that had to do with the quietness that I was using to get in and out. I went in from a direction where I figured the wind was right. I knew that if I came in from this other side, that they would be coming towards me, and that I wouldn't bump them going in at this particular area at that particular time of day. So yeah, I did my homework, but it was an amazing feeling to know that on day 1 of me being in a saddle, that this was all happening. Because I have to say that I jumped in using just some pre-scouting information, and I got in and I was on top of deer. Now, if I had just gone to the ladder stand that I could have gone to, where the deer may not have been, because that's not what my information was telling me. That's not what the intel told me, that's not where the deer were. But I think some people get stuck on a stand. But this is pop in, pop out, and I was on top of deer and could have taken a shot. It would have been awesome.
That's a perfect example of a freelance do-it-yourself hunt.
That's exactly right.
What's really popular now.
It was a freelance hunt, and it worked out perfectly.
Yep.
So.
Yep. That's getting to be really, really popular now, and that's kind of cool. You went out of your comfort zone, and it worked out. Now, what I would typically tell people is, to put some steps, like put a ring of steps or put your platform like 18 inches up off the ground in a tree in your yard and throw targets all around the area in different directions.
Yep.
Or have your kid or your wife out there moving targets around and practice moving around the tree and shooting before you go out. But you just did it on the spur of the moment.
I agree. And I think, I wouldn't recommend doing it like what I did. I would strongly recommend getting used to it in the yard, hanging up, move the targets around, or have a few targets and just shoot, because I'm not sure I was all that comfortable shooting. Because I did pull my bow back once, and I think my bicep felt funny, like it'd gotten cold and just wasn't ready to go into action, kind of thing. So I do think you're absolutely right. What I did is probably not the best way to do it, but I was I wanted to test how quickly I could get up and get in the dark, not doing this ever before. And
I don't Yeah, you were actually testing your ability to use the saddle as opposed to,
Yes. Correct.
practicing and trying to kill a deer with your first.
Right, yeah.
That wasn't your...
The primary objective was not necessarily to kill a deer that day. It was really to use the saddle. Just so happened that I probably could have killed a deer that day if I wanted to, but I wasn't quite confident with my shooting yet, so I didn't want to just do that. Now, knowing that, I'll be practicing in the yard and doing some more testing with the thing to make sure that my shots are on. I shoot a lot. It's not like I don't shoot. I shoot from elevated platforms. I shoot for lunch. I'll go out and shoot a few. So I do shoot a lot, but it is a different feel shooting from the saddle than it is from a platform. I have to say, like, just holding the bow, it feels sturdier somehow. Like I feel like
You're a lot more solid.
Yeah, I feel like my feet are more locked in, which in any physical anything, there's a lot of anytime you're using your core and your feet are steady, there's a lot more balance and structure to everything else.
You're not having to balance yourself standing on a platform,
Yep.
balancing yourself just on 2 feet.
Right.
Yeah, and looking into the abyss in front of you.
Correct. Yep. And
Once you use a saddle for a while, you'll never even look at a tree stand. And the tree stand companies absolutely hate saddles because it goes against the grain. Tree stand companies want to sell you a stand for every tree you have prepped. So they are not real keen on this whole saddle thing because you only have to have one saddle for the rest of your life to hunt every tree you ever hunt forever.
I'm sure they're not going to like that we're having this conversation. That's for sure.
No.
But I did like the stability that it gave me, both during just waiting for the deer and just being able to, when I was practicing holding the bow when I was up there, compared to what I've been in other stands, whether it be a climber, whether it be a hang-on. There's always an element, for whatever reason, when you don't feel like you're connected to the tree, there is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like a sense of insecurity, and you almost like get a little bit of a wobble, and you have to correct yourself. Your body is naturally trying to correct itself, and that does not work for great shots. But in the saddle, I never felt like there was never a moment ever that I didn't feel completely solid and connected to the earth through the tree.
Yep, and that's the way it should be.
Right. So
absolutely the way it...
Let's get out of the conversation of hunting from the saddle. It's been a great conversation, and just get into some...
I mentioned one more thing, Jay, before we let the saddle thing go.
Absolutely.
Because people need to keep in mind, as far as safety,
Yep.
a saddle is the safest thing you could possibly hunt out of. In fact, I put on these spring workshops. People come from all over the country, and I've had people bring their kids and say, my wife won't let my kids hunt out of anything but a saddle. Because with a saddle, basically, you get to the base of the tree, you put the safety belt around the tree, you climb up the tree with the safety belt going around the tree, and you adjust the safety belt with the diameter of the tree as it gets smaller or bigger. And then once you get up to your ring of steps, then you basically leave your safety belt hooked up. You take out your lead rope, you hook up your lead rope, hook it to your bridge in front of you, and then once you're physically hooked up to your lead, and that's what you're going to hunt from, then you disattach the safety rope and put it in a pouch. Then when you get done hunting, you reattach your safety belt, then disattach your lead strap and go down with the safety belt again. So at no time are you ever disconnected from the tree.
Right. Is your setup similar to what Tethered has developed?
It's similar. It's the same concept.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it at that for now. 2020 is going to be an interesting year.
Okay.
There's
All
some
right.
new stuff coming to fight for 2020.
All right. That's a good hint. So, all right. So there's the whole thing about getting into the stand and being mobile and comfortable and all that stuff, but there's still the killing deer aspect. And you did describe how you like to be in the stand and effectively take the shot, to position your body so that you can take that kill shot. Because ultimately, unlike what I was doing the other day, it really is about killing the deer. I was really testing the unit to see if I could do it.
Yeah.
And hoping that maybe a nice buck would come by or something that was not a doe. But
And then you would have went into kill mode.
And I would have gone into kill mode. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. So it just depended on what happened. I did not necessarily expect to see deer. I knew I was in a good spot, and I had a chance of seeing a deer. But I also know there's a good buck in there, and the buck that I was hoping would show up didn't. But it is. Let's talk about killing bucks. What else do you think about, even on a 12-month plan? Where does your buck killing start and where does it end?
My killing starts during postseason. When I start prepping, looking for new locations, prepping new trees, going back and re-prepping all the summer growth from the year before from my other older locations. Because once I'm done in April, by the end of April, I have all my new locations prepped. I went to every single one of my old locations and cleared out summer growth from the year before. And then I don't go back into any of those trees until the speed tour, where I'm looking for my early season locations. And I don't clear anything up. My shooting lanes and everything, I make them wide enough in the spring that, even with what little new summer growth there's going to be, I'll still have plenty of shooting lanes width. So in my opinion, if scouting and location preparation is the biggest part of killing deer on a consistent basis, is scouting, looking for the sign during postseason when you can go in and you can bump every deer out of the area for 7 days in a row from daylight till dark in February, March, or April, and it has no bearing on deer movements come fall. So you can do as much work as you want, prep as much as you want, and then you leave it alone until season. And you're hunting fresh deer other than the other people in the area that are preseason scouting, which you can't do anything about that because most people do all their scouting and prep during preseason. But that's a big part of it. And then probably the next couple of things are seasonal timing, daily timing for each location. So obviously, if you got an oak tree, apple tree, they're only going to be dropping during the early season for the most part. So those are early season locations. So that's the seasonal timing for those. And also they have daily timing. You don't go hunt an apple tree on a morning hunt because you're likely going to be spooking the deer out from under the apple tree with your before daylight entry.
Right.
So those are strictly evening locations. The same with a white oak. If you're in ag areas and you've got oak trees that are relatively close, within 100 yards of crop fields, you don't want to hunt those in mornings either. Now, if you're hunting big timber areas, you can go in and hunt oaks in the morning. But if you're going in an ag area and hunting them in the mornings, you're probably going to be spooking deer out of there with your entry. So those are evening spots as well.
Okay.
And then all my bedding area locations, the seasonal timing on those, or my transition corridor locations between bedding areas, those are all rut phase locations. And typically on an interior bedding area location, it's an all-day set because I'm in my tree an hour and a half before daylight, so I don't spook anything with my entry. Because typically in a pressured area, most of the mature bucks are in the bedding area before daylight. So I'm in there way before they come in, and I don't leave until a half an hour after dark, which is enough time to let them move out of the bedding area before I get down and exit.
Okay.
So seasonal and daily timing is important. Entry routes and exit routes are extremely important. And obviously scouting and location preparation. I don't know. I bet 50 to 70% of the locations I walk by other hunters, if they're in any kind of security cover, they have terrible shooting lanes. Their shooting lanes are so narrow, the odds of them stopping a moving animal in a shooting lane that's 2 feet wide is near impossible. Lots of times I'll get up in other hunters' trees, and I'm like, hell, if a deer came in here, it's a decent spot, but if a deer came in here, how do you get a shot? They don't have any. Having them properly prepared is a big deal too.
Do you?
And how you get up a tree is a big deal. If you're prepping a tree for the rut phase when all the foliage is going to be down, that's the cool thing about postseason scouting. When you're postseason scouting, the foliage is also down. So you're looking at the tree in the exact same manner it's going to look like when you go in to hunt it during the rut phases. So you got to get up that tree a little bit higher. You may have to get up there 25 feet. Otherwise, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb if you're down there 16, 18 feet. If you go in preseason scout, there's foliage on everything, and you set a location up for hunting during the rut, and you're 16 feet up in a tree, and that's fine when you prepped it, in September, because there's a lot of foliage. You go back there during the rut when the foliage is down, you stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
So postseason scouting, You're looking at the locations, the security cover. You're looking at everything the way it's going to look when you actually go in to hunt it during the rut phases. And you know, in every state in the country, and I do the stats in all the books I've written, every state in the country, 55 to 65% of the bucks in the record book are shot during the 3-week rut, pre-rut and rut phase.
Mm-hmm.
So out of a 3 to 4 month season, 55 to 65% of the book bucks are taken during a 3 to 3.5 week time frame of that whole season.
Wow.
So that's what you want to key on.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
And midday during the rut phase is a big deal. You know, a lot of people, if you're in the interior of a bedding area, you've got to sit all day. To give you a kind of a strange stat, of the 20 bucks, I've got 31 bucks in the Michigan record book and 19 in the record book from out of state. But of the 31 in Michigan, 20 of them were shot between November 1st and November 14th. So that's a 2-week time frame. And of those 20, 7 of those 20 were shot between 11 o'clock a.m. and 3 p.m. So that's 35%. So I've shot 35% of my book bucks in that 2-week time frame during midday, while I've only spent 8% of my time on stand during midday. So I've killed 35% of the bucks during midday while spending only 8% of my time on stand between 11 and 3 o'clock.
Wow. Okay. That's a very interesting stat, too. Wow.
Midday is a big deal. Big deal in pressured areas. That midday movement's a big deal. But you got to be in the right type of an area. I mean, you're not going to go set up on the edge of a crop field and sit during midday and see anything. That ain't going to happen. You gotta be someone's a cover.
The spot is important, right? It's not just the midday movement. It's getting into the right spot and then allowing the midday movement to occur.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a whole different ballgame because you can go anywhere and they could be moving midday, but if you're not in the right spot, it isn't going to matter.
Exactly. And a lot of people struggle hunting midday because midday hunting is very boring. It's extremely boring.
Right.
Don't see a lot of activity, but typically when you do, it's a good buck. You see the percentages of good bucks you see during midday, as long as you're in some semblance of security cover, you know, in bedding areas, for instance, that's where mature bucks push the does into when they're hot, and that's where they breed them during the daytime. And, you know, they'll get up and push the doe 20, 50 yards and breed them, and then they'll bed down and they'll get up 20 minutes later and do the same thing and breed them again. So, you know, in a bedding area, there's a lot of activity that happens during the rut phases, and most people like to sit on the perimeter of a bedding area and listen to what's going on in the bedding area as opposed to being in it where the action actually is.
Right.
But you got to hunt it strategically. You got to strategically make it an all-day sit and commit to a way before daylight entry and an after dark exit.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, you're spooking deer with your morning exit and spooking deer with your evening entry.
Right. So you're getting in real early, well before sunrise, into these bedding areas where you can partake in the activities and see. You know, you're going to be in the midst of all that stuff when it happens.
Yeah, I'm in my tree and settled in and quiet an hour and a half before daylight.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going in there. I'm entering the bedding area probably at 2 hours before daylight because it takes me about a half hour to climb a tree and get set up the way I like to get set up.
You don't strike me as the guy that is casual about that. Like, it seems to me that you're on top of that endlessly. Like, this is something that's important. Am I picking up on that correctly?
I'm not casual about anything when it comes to deer hunting.
Okay.
I'm very serious about everything I do. I'm serious about every step I take.
Okay.
So by season timing and daily timing, all that stuff's really important. You know, all buck activity revolves around doe activity during the rut phases. So a lot of people make the mistake and they hunt their rut phase spots. They'll hunt a primary scrape area, you know, during the October lull when the big bucks are primarily nocturnal, and what they're doing is they're altering the doe traffic. That, you know, you hunt it 2 or 3 times, and the first time you may see 4 does, the next time you see 2, and then the next time you see none. Well, when you alter the doe activity at a rut phase location, obviously the bucks that are going to be pursuing those does, they're not going to be coming to that location during the daylight either. You know, they may come and there may be a lot of activity, buck activity there, but if it's all after dark, what's the worth of, you know, there's no sense in hunting it.
Right.
All the buck activity in the world is worthless if it's all made after dark.
Right. So do you have let me get back up. Have you ever missed your timing? Like, you ever been running late, and do you change your plan if that's the case, or you just don't go at all?
No, I don't change my timing. I don't change my timing when I'm going hunting.
Okay.
There has been times that, and this happened in 2012. This was the last time it happened. I went to a tree. It was pre-rut, late October, and my plan was to sit in the tree until noon. And it was a weekday, and it was relatively close to my house. And it was about 9:30. I just was thinking about all the work I had to do. I have 2 jobs.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about work I had to do at home. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to cut this hunt early. And I'm hunting on a scrape line, a runway that had scrapes every 40 or 50 yards along it. Okay. And it eventually went to a primary scrape area where there were no trees I could hunt from. And so I lowered my bow, got down out of the tree. As I'm untying my bow, I hear some leaves crunching over behind me over this little knoll that I'm kind of hunting next to. And sure as crap, before I could even untie my bow, the buck that I was after came by at 8 yards. And he stopped, and I'm behind a tree. I'm trying to just hide behind a tree.
Right.
And I'm untying the bow, and I knocked an arrow, and as soon as I moved to the side of the tree, and he's like 8 yards from me, he saw me. He picked me up in his peripheral side vision, and I mean, he just took off and ran right down into the swamp. I was on the edge of a swamp.
Yeah.
And so that was the time that I got down and I broke my plan, and it cost me.
Yeah. So it happens. It happens, but it happens so rare in your life, it sounds like that you can remember the exact date and year that it happened. Like you're sticking to the plan, or you're not going. That's what it sounds like.
I wrote an article about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to write articles about everything, whether it's good or bad. In 2016, I went on an Ohio hunt in December, and I didn't kill anything, and I learned a lot of things on that hunt, and I wrote an article about it for other people to learn from them as well, that I didn't kill anything.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's important, because I think you learn a lot from your I don't know if failure is the right thing, because I guess you learn a lot from failure, right? It's
you never forget your failures.
Right.
I'll forget my things I do right. I'll forget those less.
Right.
Or more frequently than I'll forget failures.
Right. Yep. Do you have a particular species of tree that you prefer to hang out of, or do you look for a certain kind of tree? I
like big diameter trees. That's another thing you see on YouTube. Most of these saddle guys are getting in trees that are 12 to 14 inches in diameter. Mm-hmm. I'm a guy that likes trees 20 to 26, 28 inch diameters.
Okay.
I like trees that I can hide behind, and I can get up them a little bit higher without having to worry about the tree moving because it's so thin. And I like trees that have some branches in to block my visual, give me some concealment cover. Because usually during the rut phases, they don't have any leaves in them. So, if they've got some branches for some concealment cover, that helps out a little bit.
Yep. Gotcha. Could you take us on a memorable hunt that you've been on? I'm sure you've been on a bunch of them, and a lot of them I'm sure are memorable. Maybe you could just pick one.
I'll give you one of my most memorable saddle hunts, since we've been talking about saddle hunting.
Perfect.
And this hunt was in 2004, and it was in Michigan, and it was on Election Day in 2004, and I voted up north, and I drove about 2.5 hours down to this spot, and I got there at about noon, and I got in my tree for the rest of the midday hunt and the evening hunt, and I was hunting at a primary scrape area next to 2 apple trees. And basically there was a swamp on one side of me, and then I was up on a hill ridge, and then it dropped down into heavy mature timber with really dense understudy, briars and bedding area down there too. So I was in a transition zone between these two bedding areas, the swamp and the timber with the heavy understudy. And I'm sitting in the tree. I've got the scrapes in front of me with the tree between me and the scrapes. And I had set this tree up on the southeast side of the scrape area, because I don't pay attention to the wind as far as worrying about getting winded. But once in a while, when I'm setting up at a primary scrape area, if there's a tree on the southeast side. That's what I'll set up, because typically the prevailing winds are out of the northwest. And a lot of times big mature bucks will come in and scent check a scrape area from downwind without actually coming into it. They'll stay in the security cover and just scent check it from, 15 or 20 yards downwind.
Yep.
So I'm sitting in the tree, and that's exactly what this buck did. This buck come up the hill, and he's kind of circling around to the side of the scrapes, and I'm expecting him to come into the scrapes. I always expect him to come in, but this one didn't. And I see he's going to go around to my right. So just like we were talking about a while ago, I started to swing around to 180 degrees. I was swung around 180 degrees to the opposite side of the tree, but by the time I got around there and got into position, he had went through my lane, because I had a lane to my right, to my 3 o'clock from where I was originally sitting.
Yep.
So then I swung back around to where I originally was, and he circled around and came. I didn't have a shooting lane behind me. He circled around and he came in, and he came right up to the base of my tree. My tree's probably 15 yards from the scrape area in the brush. He is standing literally, if I'd have spit, it had fell on him. Standing at the base of my tree, and he lifted his head up and did a little lip curl, trying to win the scrapes.
Yeah.
And an 8-point came in earlier that I'd passed on. He was a small buck. And anyway, he turned around. There was nothing of interest. No does that came in there. So he circled around, and he was going back on the exact same route he came in on. So I swung around the tree, because he's going to go back through that lane. And when I swung around the tree, sure as hell, he was taking the exact footsteps. And when he got to that lane, I just did a vocal doe bleat, and he stopped, and I shot him. It was a 154-inch 10-point.
Wow. Gotcha.
And it was awesome. And that was one of the things about the saddle. With the tree stand, I would not have been able to take that shot, because
Right.
it was on. I had to swing around 180 degrees to the opposite side of the tree to take that shot.
Yep.
I left.
That was the one thing I did notice about my hunt the other day, and is that I had a lot more ability to shoot from all around the tree. Now, you read and you see these videos, it's 360 shooting. It is 360 shooting. You can absolutely do it.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's been fun, John, kind of taking your wealth of saddle hunting information and experience, and being able to talk to you, and me being a novice, an absolute novice at this thing, but realizing what you saw eons ago, that this is the way you wanted to do it from forevermore, for all kinds of reasons. And it's been this eye opener. So I appreciate everything you've done through your entire career. It's just helped me understand a lot. I know you've helped a lot of other hunters in getting on multiple podcasts and getting on our podcast. We had a lot of really good responses and feedback the last time you were on. And I know we've talked a long time tonight, and it's been just an absolute pleasure to listen to you again, your wealth of information. I can't thank you enough for doing what you're doing.
And I also want to reach out and thank Tethered, because I've written 3 books, and I've produced some instructional DVDs, and I do these whitetail workshops in the spring. But I've been trying to get this saddle thing going for years and years. And then Greg and Ernie, who own Tethered, they just come in, and Greg is a social media guru, and Ernie is just a workaholic. So Ernie's taking on the business and the manufacturing aspect, and Greg's doing the marketing, and they're just crushing it on social media. And they're the ones that are bringing this saddle hunting to the forefront in the manner that it is now. And I'm just grateful to them as much as I am to the hunting public guys for, putting a new light on hunting public land, and, and really, putting congratulations to guys that shoot a nice little buck on public land, and not to feel like they're inferior. It's just where they hunt, and that's all there is.
That's it.
So,
it is to each his own. It's we shouldn't be bashing each other.
Well, okay, Jay, I appreciate that.
So do you, and just a couple last questions, John, I'll let you go. Do you target a certain buck every year, or is it like through cameras and things like that, using game cameras, or how do you approach an area like that?
I don't use game cameras very often in Michigan. I don't have anything out right now. And so, no, I don't target a specific buck. I target deer sign. I scout and I hunt deer sign. I know where deer are going to be. I know where deer are going to move through. Everything revolves around security cover, from bedding areas to whether it be bedding to bedding areas during the rut. You got to have good transition security cover. Or if you're hunting an apple tree or an oak tree or a beech nut tree, it's got to have good perimeter security. Everything revolves around security cover because mature bucks just don't feel comfortable during daylight hours moving if they don't have a quick exit route within 2 or 3 bounds where they can just jump into security cover and they're gone. They don't like moving through open woodlots with no understudy or along the edge of an open hayfield like they do, like you see on TV. They don't do that in pressured areas.
Right.
So, I guess that's my answer to the question.
Gotcha. So you it sounds like you target certain spots.
I don't target certain deer. I target locations where I know if there's a big buck in the area,
Yep.
that's where he's going to be. Now it's just me being there at the same time he's there.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, when I go out of state, when I go to Kansas and Iowa, which, there's lots and lots of mature bucks and they're relatively easy to kill, I put a camera at every single location and I check the cameras every single day. I would never, ever do that in Michigan, just like a guy in PA or New York or West Virginia wouldn't do that because it's intrusive and you're typically leaving some form of human odor and noise. But out there you can get away with it because there's so many mature bucks. They vie a lot for breeding competition, rattling works, decoys work, grunt calls work. Just about anything you use out in those states work because there's so many big bucks, vying to breed what does there are. There's as many big bucks as there are big does.
Gotcha.
Not only is the doe to buck ratio relatively equal, so is the age bracket.
Gotcha. Okay, so
I hunt totally different in Michigan than I do when I leave Michigan.
It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. I can see because I hunt differently when I go to Maryland or when I go to Ohio or when I go to New York. That's different hunting than what I'm doing in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or Maine. Just different.
Those are tough. Massachusetts is a tough state, man.
Welcome to my world, John.
Yeah, Massachusetts is a very pressured state.
Yep. So,
and Maine is just a tough state because it's all big timber. There's it's hard to find destination locations.
Yep. And that's why we
just browse and wander.
That's why we pray for snow and do it the Benoit way. That's exactly.
Yep. There you go.
That's pretty much it. So, yep. Now you know where I live. That's what it's like.
Yep.
One last question.
Remember those days, outdoor life? Benoits were the first guys that ever really wrote much about hunting whitetails, and they were gun hunters, obviously.
Right.
But they would basically walk a deer down, walk a big set of tracks down, and you could do that there. A lot of states you can't do that because as soon as you go 200 yards, you're off the property line.
Exactly. And it requires a large parcel of land, and it requires the traditional land use laws that go back to colonial times. And there's a perfect blend there, and it's an adapting to the environment and to the laws. It's kind of an interesting concept, right? When you're taking some old laws and you're taking the geography and the topography and the elements of snow, and you're putting it all together. And that's kind of how the Benoits became who they were because of all that. But yes, you couldn't do that in Michigan. You can't do it in Ohio, even though you get snow in these certain areas. But there's certain restrictors that just don't allow you to do that.
There is areas up in the Upper Peninsula you can do that. The Upper Peninsula is almost so much public land up there, and it's just big timber. It could be 20 miles between roads. So
right, yeah. So it's not all of Michigan, but
yeah, it's more swampy though than Maine. Maine's got a lot of big timber.
Big timber, 85% timber in New Hampshire and Maine, very similar. So there are a lot of hiding spots, and it's not like Ohio. It's the exact when Dusty came into my life here at the studio and the podcast, and I got to hunt Ohio for the first time. It was the exact opposite of what I've been used to, where they have lots of ag and very little timber, and I have lots of timber and very little ag, and it was just a whole. Oh, that's why I started the podcast. I wanted to learn about all things hunting and how everybody does it across the United States, and it's been a very interesting.
Ag areas are much more to hunt than timber areas.
Right. That's what I've figured out. It's like, well, they're all, we drive through and it's like, Dusty, all the deer are right there. And you only get a little strip of timber. They got to be in there. They're not, because they're not in the field.
That's right. And ag areas typically have more deer per square mile than big timber areas.
Right. Yep.
Timber areas have a smaller carrying capacity as far as, what will support a deer herd.
Yep. One last question. Do you always hunt from a certain elevation, or is it depending upon what the tree lets you do?
Pretty rare I'm below 25 feet to my feet. Okay. But, yes, I've shot deer 12 feet off the ground out of cedar trees, out of my sling, where I've got a lot of background cover, and I knew I didn't have to move. Basically, this was on private, and I cut a little slit out of the tree where my body was going to be, and my only shot was going to be right to my left. That was the runway coming out of the cattail marsh, and that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't a book buck. It was a 2.5-year-old back in the 70s, early 80s. And it happened just like I planned, but I was only 12 feet off the ground, and he came by at like 8 yards. I felt like I could reach out and touch him. He was so close.
Wow. Very cool. Gotcha. Well,
typically I'm up pretty high.
Okay.
That's why I practice off the roof of my house. I never ever practice off the ground. I replicate my practicing like I'm hunting out of a tree. So yeah, and you can just get away with more the higher you get. It makes your shot angles more difficult, but that's why I practice from a similar height.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes sense. John, I got to say, this has just absolutely been a blast, and I expected to go an hour, and we're well into hour 43. It's been absolutely mind-blowing, and I appreciate taking the time again to talk to us and our audience. It's always just very educational, and I guarantee you that, as usual, our audience will appreciate anything you do.
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope everybody goes out there and kills something.
John is just a wealth of information. Of course, he's been saddle hunting longer than anybody that we can trace, so I would expect him to know an awful lot. He's killed a lot of big bucks. He's done a great service to the concept of saddle hunting. And from the novice saddle hunter, me, I can honestly say it was one of the most comfortable experiences that I've ever had in a tree. And quite honestly, I'm thinking about just ditching all of my other tree stands. That's how impressed I was with the new saddle hunting system. So looking forward to watching what John does. I know he had a little injury there with his shoulder, but I'm sure he'll be back in the woods in no time and killing more big bucks. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.